The last blueprint. Kaylee's Thorn stood at the edge of the obsidian spire, watching her civilization burn. The Velkrith Dominion's warships carved through Earth's atmosphere like knives through silk, their crimson beams reducing millennia of human achievement to ash and memory. She clutched the chrome device against her chest, the retrograde engine, humanity's final desperate gambit. Around her, the ruins of New Geneva smoldered, the architectural marvel she'd spent 20 years designing now a skeletal monument to failure. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd built humanity's greatest cities and now she'd watch them fall. Dr. Thorne, we're out of time. Marcos Vale, her former student and current quantum physicist, scrambled across the rubble-strewn platform. His face was streaked with soot and blood. The Velkrith ground forces are 3 blocks away. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. Kaylee's activated her neural interface, projecting holographic schematics into the smoke-filled air. The retrograde engine pulsed with captured temporal energy, stolen from the Velkrith themselves during a raid 6 months ago. The aliens had used temporal technology to scout humanity's defenses before attacking. Now humanity would use it to rewrite the war entirely. The calculations are solid, she said, her voice steady despite the explosions echoing through the city. I can send my consciousness back 14 years. That's enough time to prevent the first contact disaster. Marcos shook his head. You'll only have your memories and knowledge. No physical proof, no technology. They'll think you're insane. Then I'll prove I'm not. Kaylee smiled grimly. I'll build something impossible. Something that shouldn't exist yet. The concept was audacious. Instead of preventing the war through diplomacy or warnings, which historical records showed had been attempted and failed, she would architect her way backward through time. She would design structures embedded with hidden defensive technologies, disguised as artistic innovation. She would create buildings that doubled as weapons, monuments that were secretly shields, bridges that could become barricades. The Velkrith had superior firepower, but they'd never faced an enemy who'd fortified an entire planet over the course of 14 years without anyone knowing it. There's a 73% chance your neural patterns will fracture during transmission, Marcos warned, inputting final coordinates. And even if you survive, changing the timeline could what? Make things worse. Kaylee's laughed bitterly. Look around, Marcos. This is extinction. Worse isn't possible. She'd studied the invasion from every angle during the desperate years of war. The Velkrith had detected Earth through routine scanning, investigated because of quantum signatures from early human experiments with exotic matter. First contact had been peaceful for 6 months. Then humanity discovered the Velkrith were slavers, harvesting sentient species for neural processing in their war machines. Earth refused to surrender. The Velkrith responded with overwhelming force. But Kaylee's had identified the key moments. The weaknesses in Velkrith strategy, the battles that hinged on geography, the sieges that succeeded because human cities weren't designed for warfare. She'd memorized schematics, defense patterns, weapons technology that would take years to develop. Most importantly, she knew exactly when and where the Velkrith would strike. A Velkrith hunter drone shrieked overhead, its sensors sweeping the spire. Marcos activated the retrograde engine. Reality rippled like water. The device projected a sphere of twisted spacetime around Kaylee's, and she felt her atoms begin to vibrate at impossible frequencies. Remember, Marcos shouted over the temporal distortion, you can't tell anyone the truth directly. Temporal paradox protocols mean anyone you convince absolutely will become a fixed point, their memories can't be altered. Choose carefully who learns the real plan. I'll build it into the structures themselves, Kaylee said as her body began to phase. The buildings will remember even if people don't. The last thing she saw in her dying present was Marcos saluting her, tears streaming down his face. Then the obsidian spire exploded in a Velkrith bombardment, and Kaylee's Thorne's consciousness was hurled backward through 14 years of history. She woke up gasping in her apartment in Old Seattle, 14 years younger, her awards from architectural school still fresh on the wall. The date display showed March 15, 2247, 8 months before first contact with the Velkrith. Her older memories warred with her younger body's muscle memory. She stumbled to her bathroom mirror, staring at a face unmarked by war and desperation. Her hands trembled. Then she noticed her reflection's eyes. There was a faint temporal echo, a slight chromatic aberration that made her pupils seem to exist in 2 times at once. The retrograde engine had worked. She was really here. Kaylee's pulled up her old design files with shaking hands. The New Geneva proposal, the orbital arc station, the Meridian Fortress complex. All the projects that had made her famous in the original timeline, all the structures the Velkrith had effortlessly destroyed. Not this time. She opened a blank schematic and began to design humanity's survival, one impossible building at a time. The Velkrith thought they were facing an unprepared species. They had no idea they were about to wage war against an architect who'd already seen them lose. The revenge of humanity would be built backwards, brick by impossible brick. Foundations of deception. Kaylee stood before the Global Architecture Council 6 weeks after her temporal displacement, presenting what would be called the most revolutionary design philosophy in human history. She called it adaptive resonance architecture. The buildings of the future shouldn't just house us, she explained, her neural interface projecting massive holographic structures that rotated above the council chamber. They should respond to us, protect us, evolve with us. Council Director Yemura Okonkwo studied the designs with narrowed eyes. The woman was sharp. Kaylee's remembered that much from the original timeline. Yemura had survived 3 years into the war before dying in the siege of Nairobi. Not this time. These support structures, Yemura said, highlighting a lattice pattern in the new Geneva design. This isn't standard geometric optimization. What's the actual load-bearing purpose? Kaylee smiled. The lattice was actually a massive resonance array that could generate electromagnetic pulses to disable Velkrith shields. But she couldn't say that. It's based on natural crystal formations I observed in Iceland, she lied smoothly. The pattern distributes kinetic stress in unpredictable ways. I calculate a 40% increase in structural integrity against seismic events. Also against plasma bombardment, she didn't add. And these power conduits running through the foundation? Another council member asked. This seems excessive for a civilian structure. Redundancy, Kaylee's replied. If one system fails, 12 others compensate. Think of it as architectural immune response. What she'd actually designed was a distributed energy network that could be rerouted in seconds to power defensive shields or weapons emplacements. The Velkrith war doctrine relied on targeting power infrastructure first. They wouldn't expect every building to be its own self-contained fortress. The council approved her proposal with unprecedented enthusiasm. Within weeks, Kaylee's found herself appointed lead architect for Earth's orbital development program, the same position she'd held in the original timeline, but 2 years earlier. The real work began. She recruited carefully. Marcos Vale was still a graduate student, brilliant but unproven. She offered him a research position, watching his eyes light up when she showed him theoretical applications of exotic matter in construction. This is incredible, Dr. Thorne, he said, studying her schematics late one night in her private lab. But some of these equations, they're solving for variables that don't exist yet. Where did you source this? Kaylee's had prepared for this moment. Thought experiments, she said. What if we needed buildings that could survive extreme conditions? Plasma storms, kinetic bombardment, directed energy weapons. That's military thinking, not civilian architecture. Isn't it smart, she countered, to design for the worst and hope for the best? Marcos accepted the explanation, but she saw doubt flicker in his eyes. She'd have to be more careful. Temporal paradox protocols were delicate, convince someone too thoroughly of future events, and they became immutable fixed points in spacetime, unable to adapt if the timeline shifted. She needed collaborators, not believers. Her second recruit was Senna Rao, a materials engineer whose work with metamaterials would have remained obscure in the original timeline until after the Velkrith invasion made such research critical. Kaylee's found her in a small laboratory in Mumbai, underfunded and overlooked. I can get you unlimited resources, Kaylee said, but I need you to develop something that sounds impossible. Senna raised an eyebrow. I specialize in impossible. A building material that can phase shift between rigid and fluid states based on electromagnetic input. Walls that can harden against impacts or become transparent to energy weapons. That would require exotic matter integration at the molecular level. The energy requirements alone. Not a problem. I have theoretical frameworks for zero-point energy taps that could power it. Senna stared at her. Those frameworks don't exist. I know. They do now, Kaylee said, transferring files to Senna's interface. I'm giving you a blank check and complete creative freedom. Can you do it? Senna's eyes scanned the data, widening with each line. This is, Dr. Thorne, this is at least 10 years ahead of current materials science. How did you? Does it matter? Can you build it? A slow smile spread across Senna's face. Give me 18 months. First contact with the Velkrith was scheduled for November 4, 2247, 7 months away. Kaylee's worked 20-hour days, overseeing construction of New Geneva while secretly embedding defense systems in every structure. She designed the crystalline towers with internal resonance chambers that could generate sonic weapons. She built the metro transit system with emergency blast doors disguised as art installations. She created the central gardens with underground bunkers accessed through sculptures that served as hidden elevators. Every coffee shop, every apartment complex, every parking structure became part of her grand design. 4 months before first contact, she received a visitor. Dr. Ishara Kane from the Temporal Studies Institute arrived unannounced at her construction site. The woman was slight, intense, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. "Dr. Thorne," she said without preamble, "your designs contain temporal echo patterns. Structures that shouldn't be possible with current technology, yet here they are. I need to know, are you building for a present that hasn't happened yet, or a future that already has?" Kaylee's blood went cold. She'd accounted for materials scientists questioning her tech, for engineers doubting her methods. She hadn't anticipated a temporal physicist recognizing the chronological fingerprints embedded in her architecture. "I'm building for survival," Kaylee said carefully. "Isn't that what all architects do?" Ishara studied her with uncomfortable intensity. "Most architects build for the world as it is. You're building for a war that hasn't started. The question is, how do you know it's coming?" The weight of foreknowledge. Kaylee's made a decision that would either save or doom her mission. She invited Ishara Kane to her private workshop beneath the New Geneva construction site, a space that officially didn't exist in any building plans. "Before I show you anything," Kaylee said, sealing the entrance behind them, "understand that what you're about to learn makes you a fixed point. Your knowledge becomes immutable. If the timeline shifts, you'll remember both versions. It's psychologically devastating." Ishara didn't hesitate. "Show me." Kaylee's projected her memories directly from her neural interface. 14 years of war, billions dead, Earth reduced to a guerrilla resistance fighting from underground cities. She showed the Velkrith warships, the harvesting facilities, the human minds enslaved in neural matrices. She showed the fall of New Geneva, her death in the Obsidian Spire, the desperate gambit with the retrograde engine. When the projection ended, Ishara was trembling. Tears streaked her face. "November 4th, the temporal physicist whispered. First contact. I remember now, I was there in the original timeline. I was part of the scientific delegation. I died in the initial bombardment when negotiations failed. I'm sorry," Kaylee said. "I needed someone who understands temporal mechanics. Someone who can help me stabilize the changes I'm making." Ishara wiped her eyes, her expression hardening into something fierce. "What do you need?" Over the next 3 months, Ishara became Kaylee's partner in the impossible task. While Kaylee's built humanity's hidden fortress, Ishara developed temporal anchors, devices that would preserve the defensive timeline even if the Velkrith detected paradoxes and attempted temporal countermeasures. "They have temporal scouts," Ishara explained, working on crystalline devices that pulsed with chronometric energy. "In the original timeline they used them to map our defenses before the invasion. They'll do it again. But if we can anchor certain events, make them causally inevitable, then even if they scout backward they can't change what you've built." The temporal anchors were embedded in the foundations of every major structure Kaylee's designed. To anyone else they looked like modern art installations or experimental power regulators. In reality they were chronological locks, ensuring that humanity's hidden defenses would exist regardless of temporal interference. First contact arrived on schedule. The Velkrith scout ship materialized in high orbit, broadcasting mathematical greetings. Humanity responded with cautious optimism. Kaylee's watched the news broadcasts with clenched fists, remembering every detail of the original timeline. The diplomatic delegation shuttled up to meet the aliens. Commander Elias Hunt led the human contingent, a decorated officer who'd been one of humanity's best defenders in the original war. Kaylee's had met him once, briefly, during the siege of Europa Station. He'd died covering civilian evacuations. She'd sent him an encrypted message 3 days before first contact. Position defensive fleets at coordinates that match no strategic value. Trust me. He'd done it, though she knew he didn't understand why. The first 6 months of contact proceeded exactly as she remembered. The Velkrith seemed peaceful, offering technology exchanges and cultural dialogue. Humanity's leaders were cautiously optimistic. Only a few people knew the truth. Kaylee's used those 6 months to complete her masterwork. The Sentinel Network, 247 buildings across Earth and its orbital stations, each one a node in a planet-wide defensive grid. To the public and the Velkrith observers, They were architectural marvels, a human renaissance of engineering and design. To the few who knew the truth, they were the teeth of a trap waiting to close. Marcos approached her in month 5, his face troubled. "I've been analyzing the Velcroth's technology gifts," he said. "Dr. Thorne, they're too advanced. Not just beyond us, strategically beyond us. They're giving us power generation systems we can't properly maintain, weapons we can't effectively deploy. It's like they want us dependent. They're sizing us up," Kaylee said. "Seeing if we're worth enslaving or just eliminating." "How do you?" Marcos stopped, studying her face. "You know something. You've known from the beginning." She couldn't tell him everything. "Not yet. I know that architecture is about anticipating needs before they arise. I'm very good at anticipation." The revelation came on schedule, month 6 of contact. A Velcroth data cache was accidentally accessed by a human technician, or perhaps not so accidentally. Kaylee's had never been sure if it was human luck or alien arrogance that exposed the truth. The files contained detailed records of 47 harvested species, including neural extraction procedures, optimal collection methods, and efficiency reports. Humanity learned that the Velcroth saw them as resources, not equals. Choice neural patterns for integration into Velcroth war computational matrices. Estimated yield: 7 billion processing units. Commander Hunt, following protocols Kaylee's had suggested through back channels, immediately isolated the Velcroth delegation and fortified Earth's defenses. The aliens, realizing their intentions were exposed, issued an ultimatum: submit to harvesting or face extinction. Humanity's answer was universal: defiance. The Velcroth fleet arrived 3 weeks later, 200 warships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect attack formation. They'd done this 47 times before. They knew exactly how to efficiently conquer and harvest a species. What they didn't know was that this time, the prey had been preparing for 14 years. Kaylee stood in the New Geneva Command Center, disguised as a water treatment facility, and watched the alien armada deploy. Beside her, Ishera activated the temporal anchors, locking the defensive timeline into causality. Marcos stood at the weapons console, his hands steady despite the fear in his eyes. "All Sentinel network nodes report ready." Senna's voice came through the comm metamaterial systems at full power. Commander Hunt's face appeared on the main display. "Dr. Thorne, this is insane. You've turned our entire civilization into a weapon." "No," Kaylee's replied. "I've turned our civilization into a fortress. There's a difference." The first Velcroth ships entered the atmosphere, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea they were flying into a planet that had been built to kill them. "All units," Kaylee's commanded. "Activate the Architect's Revenge." The fortress awakens. The Velcroth warships descended like falling stars, their crimson hulls reflecting Earth's sunlight as they adopted attack formations. Fleet Master Zradhawk commanded from the lead vessel, reviewing the tactical data with satisfaction. Scans showed primitive kinetic defenses, basic energy shields, conventional military installations. Standard pre-spacefaring resistance. Estimated subjugation time: 43 hours. The estimate would prove catastrophically incorrect. "Begin bombardment of primary population centers," Zradhawk commanded. "Prioritize architectural structures. Eliminate shelters first, then." The New Geneva crystalline towers hummed to life. Kaylee's watched through city-wide sensors as her first trap activated. The tower's resonance chambers, built into what everyone believed were decorative elements, generated a harmonic frequency at exactly 47.3 kHz. To humans it was inaudible. To Velcroth biology, which relied on a crystalline neural structure, it was agony. The lead squadron of Velcroth fighters screamed and shattered, their pilots incapacitated instantly, their ships spiraling into the ocean. 47 craft lost in seconds. Phase 1 successful, Kaylee's reported. Resonance weapons effective. All cities activate your harmonic arrays. Across the planet, buildings began to sing songs of destruction. Zradhawk recoiled as damage reports flooded in. Impossible. The humans had no knowledge of Velcroth neural architecture, no way to develop sonic weapons specifically calibrated to their biology. Unless. Full spectrum scan of the surface structures, he commanded. Analyze construction dates. The results made no sense. Many of these buildings were years old, built before first contact. How could humans design anti-Velcroth weapons before meeting Velcroth? Evasive patterns, Zradhawk ordered. Deploy shield harmonics to counter sonic attacks. Target the singing buildings, destroy them before. The Metro Transit System activated its second function. What the Velkrith targeting systems identified as transportation tunnels suddenly opened, revealing electromagnetic rail cannons that launched projectiles at 30 kilometers per second. The ammunition was sent as metamaterial, solid during launch, but programmed to phase into a plasma state on impact, bypassing Velkrith energy shields entirely. 17 warships died screaming as relativistic projectiles tore through their hulls. Commander Hunt, coordinating from the orbital defense station, watched in awe as Earth's cities transformed. "Dr. Thorne, what exactly did you build?" "Everything we needed," she replied. "Marcos, activate the sky web." The engineer's fingers flew across controls, activating New Geneva's primary defense grid. Invisible threads of energy suddenly became visible, a massive electromagnetic net extending from concealed emitters built into skyscrapers, bridges, and monuments. 12 Velkrith cruisers caught in the web found their propulsion systems overloaded and fried. The ships crashed into the Pacific where submarine defense platforms, disguised as deep-sea research stations, finished them with torpedo barrages. Ishera monitored the temporal stability, watching for Velkrith attempts to scout backward and prevent this impossible defense. "They're trying to deploy temporal scouts," she warned. "The anchors are holding, but they'll try to go back and destroy my buildings before they're built," Kaylee said. "I accounted for that." "Senna, activate the paradox shells." In orbit, what appeared to be communication satellites revealed their true nature. They were temporal disruptors, generating chronometric interference that made time travel within Earth's vicinity impossible. Any Velkrith scout attempting to travel backward simply bounced off the present, their consciousness scattered across multiple time frames. "Temporal scouts neutralized," Ishera confirmed. "The Velkrith are trapped in the present with us." Zrathok's fury transformed into something humans might recognize as fear. This was wrong. Harvesting operations followed predictable patterns: orbital bombardment, ground invasion, systematic collection. Prey species resisted, but always conventionally. They didn't have weapons specifically designed for Velkrith weaknesses. They didn't have planetary defenses built years in advance. "Analysis," he demanded. "How did humans know?" His tactical officer, Vryn, displayed evidence with trembling appendages. "Fleet Master, the structures exhibit temporal echo patterns. These buildings exist in two states simultaneously, their present configuration, and another configuration from a timeline that never occurred. Someone transmitted information backward through time." "Impossible. Our scouts would have detected." "The humans anchored their changes to causality itself. Our scouts cannot prevent what has become chronologically inevitable." Zrathok made a decision that would save what remained of his fleet. "Full retreat." The orbital arc station, humanity's crown jewel circling Earth at geosynchronous orbit, completed its final transformation. What billions had admired as a monument to human achievement split open like a flower, revealing the massive directed energy weapon hidden within its superstructure. Kaylee's had built it over 3 years, disguised every weapon's component as life support systems, power generators, and water recycling facilities. The Velkrith had even toured it during diplomatic exchanges, never recognizing that they were standing inside a gun big enough to kill planets. "Firing main cannon," she said quietly. The beam that erupted from the arc station was pure white, drawing power from zero-point energy taps embedded in its foundation. It caught Zrathok's flagship amidships, and for a moment the ship seemed to simply pause as if surprised. Then it exploded with enough force to create a temporary aurora across Earth's night sky. The remaining Velkrith fleet scattered, retreating toward hyperspace jump coordinates. Commander Hunt made the call. "All ships pursue. Don't let them regroup." "Negative," Kaylee's countermanded. "Let them go." "What?" "Dr. Thorne, we can end this." "We can end this war," she agreed. "But not this way. I need them to spread the word." Marcos understood first. "You want the Velkrith to tell their empire what happened here. You want them to fear us." "Fear is a better shield than any weapon," Kaylee said, watching the alien ships flee into hyperspace. 47 species submitted or were conquered. We need to be the first that made the Velkrith retreat. We need to become the species other civilizations whisper about. Ishera accessed the Velkrith ship's final transmissions before they jumped. They're broadcasting everything. Every lost ship, every failed tactic, every impossible defense. By tomorrow, half the Velkrith Dominion will know that Earth is a fortress that sees the future. "Good," Kaylee said. "Let them know. Let every slaver species in the galaxy know that humanity doesn't forgive, doesn't forget and doesn't lose, even when we have to build our victory backward through time. The cost became clear in the following hours. 2,000 casualties from the brief battle, mostly military personnel. In the original timeline, this first engagement had killed 40 million. Kaylee's allowed herself one moment of satisfaction before returning to work. The war wasn't over. It had merely begun differently. And she had so many more buildings to design. The architect's legend. News of the Velkrith defeat spread through the galaxy like shockwaves through water. The Dominion had lost 43% of their invasion fleet to a pre-spacefaring species. Impossible. Inconceivable. Terrifying. Within 6 months, 17 slave species staged successful rebellions, citing Earth's example. If humans could resist Velkrith harvesting, perhaps others could too. The Dominion suddenly faced internal collapse from a dozen directions, their resources stretched impossibly thin. But Kaylee's knew better than to celebrate. In her original timeline, the Velkrith had been desperate enough to deploy planet killers, weapons that cracked worlds like eggs. She remembered Earth's moon-shattering, tidal forces destroying coastlines, billions dying in the aftermath. They would come again. And next time they'd know what they were facing. "We need allies," Commander Hunt said during the strategy session. 200 military and scientific leaders had gathered in the new Geneva Command Center, the room that looked like an art gallery but functioned as humanity's war room. "Agreed," Kaylee said, projecting galactic maps. "In the original timeline we fought alone until it was too late. 3 species attempted to help us but they arrived after Earth fell. This time we contact them first." She highlighted 3 star systems. The Jeune Collective, methane breathers with advanced biotechnology. The Corthian Assembly, silicon-based mathematicians who view war as an equation to be solved. And the Nexian Concordat, energy beings who exist partially outside normal spacetime. "Why would they help us?" Yemra Okonkwo asked. "We're technologically primitive compared to any of them." "Because we have something they want," Kaylee's replied. "Proof that the Velkrith can be beaten. Hope is the most valuable currency in a galaxy under threat." She'd met representatives from all 3 species in the original timeline, after Earth's fall. They'd been allies in grief, fighting a losing war together. Now she'd make them allies in victory. The diplomatic missions launched within weeks. Kaylee's personally led the delegation to the Jeune Collective, bringing Senna's metamaterial samples and Marcos's exotic matter research as gifts. The Jeune Prime Counselor, a being named Threxus who resembled a floating mass of bioluminescent tentacles, examined the technology with fascination that transcended species barriers. Impossible construction, Threxus pulsed and translated chemical signals. Materials that should not exist with your civilization's development level. Temporal echoes throughout. You have built items from a future that did not occur. We built them from a future that must not occur, Kaylee's corrected. The Velkrith will come for you eventually. They harvest everyone. We're offering you a chance to prepare. Show us. Kaylee shared carefully edited memories, enough to convince, not enough to make them temporal fixed points like Ishera. The Jeunes saw the harvest facilities, the neural extraction, the billions enslaved. They saw species they recognized, allies they'd lost, futures they feared. "We will join your fortress," Threxus decided. "Teach us your backward-building technique. We shall architect our own survival." The Corthians required mathematical proof. Kaylee spent 3 weeks working with their logic matrices, demonstrating that the temporal equations balanced, that causality remained stable despite her changes, that the future she was building was mathematically superior to the one she'd prevented. The Corthian prime algorithm processed the data and reached a conclusion. Cooperating with humanity increased survival probability by 47%. For beings who thought in pure mathematics, that was an overwhelming argument. The Nexians proved most difficult. As partial energy beings, they perceived time differently, simultaneously experiencing past, present, and future in quantum superposition. They saw all of Kaylee's changes, all possible timelines branching from her interference. "Architect who builds backward," the Nexian emissary addressed her, its voice resonating across multiple frequencies. "You have created a paradox that should have destroyed causality. Yet you persist. How?" "Determination," Kaylee said simply. "And anchors. Lots of temporal anchors. You have done what we believed impossible, imposed linear causality on quantum probability. You have forced one future to become inevitable through sheer will and architecture. This fascinates us. Will you help? We will observe. And occasionally interfere on your behalf, because your timeline has become unexpectedly entertaining." It wasn't a full alliance, but Kaylee's would take it. Meanwhile, Earth continued building. Kaylee's designed the Mars Fortress colonies, embedding defensive systems and habitation domes. She created the asteroid belt shield network, disguising military installations as mining operations. She even retrofitted Luna, the moon she'd watched shatter in the original timeline, with planetary defense cannons hidden in crater formations. Humanity's sphere of influence became a three-dimensional minefield, every structure a potential weapon, every colony a hidden fortress. Ishara continued anchoring the changes, ensuring temporal stability even as the timeline diverged further from the original. "We're approaching critical divergence," she warned. "Soon the timeline will bifurcate completely. The original future will become genuinely impossible, not just improbable." "Good," Kaylee said. "That's the point." But success brought new problems. Humanity's rapid advancement drew attention from species beyond the Velkrith. Some saw Earth as a potential ally. Others saw it as a threat. The Caliph Empire, a militaristic species that controlled 40 systems, sent a diplomatic mission with thinly veiled warnings about humanity's aggressive expansion. "You build fortresses," the Caliph ambassador said, his crystalline features reflecting New Geneva's lights. "You prepare for wars that haven't started. You ally with species who fear the Velkrith." Some might interpret this as provocative. Kaylee's met his gaze steadily. "We build for survival. If that provokes slavers and conquerors, I consider that a feature, not a bug. The galaxy has an order, Architect Thorn. The strong rule, the weak submit. Your refusal to accept this natural hierarchy destabilizes everything. Then I guess we're about to find out if your natural order can withstand a species who builds their victories backward through time." The Caliph withdrew, but Kaylee's knew they'd be back. She'd created a new problem while solving the old one. Humanity was no longer prey, but that meant they were now competition. 6 months after the Velkrith defeat, the Dominion made their second move. Not an invasion, they'd learned that lesson. Instead, they deployed something worse. Temporal assassins. Kaylee's was reviewing construction plans for the Europa station when her security system screamed warnings. Temporal distortions. Chronological anomalies. Someone was attempting to travel back and kill her before she could begin her backward-building project. But Ishara's temporal anchors held firm. The assassins bounced off the protected timeline, their consciousness fragmented across probability streams. Kaylee's felt the attacks like distant thunder, futures that could have been, deaths she'd avoided, timelines where she'd never succeeded. "They're trying to unwrite you," Ishara said, monitoring the temporal assault. 47 separate attempts to prevent your existence, your work, your success. "Let them try," Kaylee's replied. "I've already built my immortality into the foundations of every structure I've designed. Even if they kill me now, the buildings remain. The defenses remain. The future I've created remains." That night, Kaylee stood atop the New Geneva crystalline towers, the first and greatest of her backward-built fortresses, and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Velkrith were regrouping. The Caliph were plotting. A dozen other species were watching, waiting to see if humanity's defiance would inspire or destroy. She smiled. Let them watch. Let them wonder. She was Kaylee's Thorn, the architect who built backward through time, and she'd only just begun. Cascading dominoes. The temporal assassination attempts continued for 3 months before Kaylee's decided to go on the offensive. If the Velkrith wanted to play with time, she'd teach them exactly how dangerous that game could be. "This is insane," Marco said, reviewing her plans. "You want to build a temporal broadcast station that will transmit your knowledge to every species in the galaxy simultaneously? Do you understand the paradox potential?" "I understand perfectly," Kaylee's replied. "The Velkrith used temporal technology to scout and conquer. I'm going to teach everyone else how to defend against it. Level the playing field across the entire galaxy." Ishara was already working on the calculations. "If we anchor the broadcast to multiple fixed points across spacetime, we can create a cascading information wave. Every species that receives it becomes part of the anchor network, stabilizing the new timeline further." "We'd be weaponizing knowledge itself," Senna added, fascinated despite her concerns. "Every species would suddenly know how to build defenses against temporal attacks, how to embed defensive systems in architecture, how to survive," Kaylee's finished. "The galaxy is full of species living in fear of the Velkrith and others like them. I'm giving them the tools to build their own fortresses." The temporal broadcast station was built into the lunar defense grid, disguised as an advanced communications array. It took 6 months to complete, with assistance from the Gen's biotechnology, Corthian mathematics, and Nexian temporal expertise. The Velkrith detected the construction and sent their remaining fleet, 93 warships, everything they could muster after their initial defeat and the subsequent rebellions. "They're accelerating," Commander Hunt reported. "They'll be in weapons range in 4 hours. Dr. Thorne, if we don't finish the broadcast station before they arrive." "We'll finish," Kaylee said calmly. "Marcos, how's the 0-point energy tap?" "Stable. We can power the broadcast for exactly 17 seconds before the system overloads." 17 seconds to change the galaxy, Kaylee's mused. "That's all we need." The Velkrith fleet arrived with overwhelming force, having learned from their first defeat. They deployed temporal disruptors of their own, trying to prevent Earth from using time-based defenses. They scattered their formation to avoid mass casualties from resonance weapons. They maintained maximum shields and point defense systems. It didn't matter. This time Earth wasn't fighting alone. The Jeune fleet materialized first, 43 bioships that looked like massive flowering organisms, their weaponized pollen capable of eating through Velkrith armor. They'd built their ships using Kaylee's backward-building philosophy, embedding defensive and offensive systems and structures that appeared organic and harmless. The Corthian warships followed, geometric perfection given form, their weapon systems solving the equation of Velkrith defeat with mathematical precision. Every shot calculated for maximum efficiency, every maneuver optimized for strategic advantage. Even the Nexians, who'd promised only observation, interfered, phasing Velkrith ships partially out of normal spacetime, leaving them vulnerable to conventional weapons while their crews experienced subjective centuries in milliseconds. Fleetmaster Zrathok, commanding from a new flagship after losing his first, watched his second invasion crumble. But he'd been authorized for one final gambit. "Deploy the causality bomb," he commanded. The weapon was theoretical even by Velkrith standards, a device that could sever a region of space from the normal flow of time, creating a bubble where causality no longer functioned. Past, present, and future would collapse into quantum uncertainty. Everything in the affected area would simply cease to exist coherently. The bomb launched. Kaylee saw it on her displays, a black sphere that seemed to devour light itself, accelerating toward Earth. 50 seconds to impact, Ishara reported, her voice remarkably steady. "If it detonates, everything within 3 light seconds becomes temporally incoherent. Earth, the moon, everyone dies. Or," Kaylee said, "we catch it." She activated the temporal broadcast station prematurely, not to transmit knowledge, but to create a temporal eddy, a localized time distortion that would slow the bomb's approach without detonating it. The causality bomb hit the temporal eddy and froze, hanging in space like an ornament of extinction. "Senna, Marcos, you know what to do," Kaylee said. They'd planned for this, not specifically a causality bomb, but the principle was the same. Any weapon dangerous enough to destroy Earth was dangerous enough to be turned against its creators. Metamaterial drones launched from Luna, their phase-shifting properties allowing them to interact with the frozen bomb without triggering it. They attached propulsion systems, reoriented the trajectory, and released it from the temporal eddy, now aimed directly at the Velkrith fleet. Zrathok had 3 seconds to realize his mistake before his own weapon detonated amidst his ships. 47 warships simply stopped existing coherently. Their crews experienced every possible timeline simultaneously: birth, death, victory, defeat, all at once, forever and never. The remaining Velkrith fleet broke completely, jumping to hyperspace in panic disorder. "Now," Kaylee said, "activate the broadcast." The temporal broadcast station came online, its signal propagating across the galaxy at speeds that made light look stationary. In 17 seconds, Kaylee's transmitted everything: defensive architecture principles, temporal anchor technology, metamaterial designs, resonance weapon specifications, 0-point energy taps. She transmitted the knowledge of how to build backward through time, how to prepare for wars before they started, how to turn civilization itself into a fortress. 372 species received the broadcast. Most were species the Velkrith had targeted or enslaved. Some were neutral powers. A few were other predatory civilizations who suddenly realized their prey had learned to bite back. The galaxy transformed overnight. The Velkrith Dominion collapsed within a year. 47 enslaved species staged successful rebellions using knowledge from Kaylee's broadcast. Their harvesting facilities were destroyed. Their temporal scouts found themselves trapped in presence that fought back. Their warships encountered defenses they couldn't overcome. The slavers who'd conquered 47 civilizations were brought down by the 48th. But not all consequences were positive. The Caliph Empire, receiving the broadcast, recognized both opportunity and threat. They began building their own backward fortresses, but not for defense. They saw Calip's techniques as tools for conquest: build the victory, then fight the war. A dozen other militaristic species did the same. Ishara confronted Caliph in the aftermath. You've started an arms race across the entire galaxy. Species are using your knowledge to build empires, not just defend themselves. I know, Caliph said quietly. I've created new problems while solving the old ones. But slavery as a galactic institution is dead. The Velkrith are finished. That was worth the price. Was it? In trying to save humanity, have you endangered everyone? Caliph looked out at the stars, at the galaxy she'd changed through sheer determination and temporal paradox. I guess we'll find out. Either way, no one will ever look at architecture the same way again. Commander Hunt approached with urgent news. Dr. Thorne, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. Apparently they've been watching everything. They want to meet you. The Galactic Council? Caliph had heard of them only in myths, an ancient organization that supposedly maintained balance among civilizations. They say you violated temporal protocols. They're demanding you stand trial for crimes against causality itself. Caliph laughed. Of course they are. Can't change the galaxy without someone getting upset about it. Will you go? She thought about the fortress planet she'd built, the species she'd saved, the future she'd rewritten through architecture and determination. She thought about standing trial for saving humanity. Absolutely, she said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The price of tomorrow. The Galactic Council convened in a structure that hurt to look at, a space station existing partially outside normal dimensions, visible from all points in the galaxy simultaneously. Caliph arrived with Ishara, Marcos, and Senna, prepared to defend humanity's survival against whatever charges ancient powers might level. The council chamber was vast and empty, containing only 5 figures who seemed to be made of crystallized time itself. They were ancient, old enough to remember the galaxy's first civilizations, perhaps old enough to have built causality's foundations. Caliph Thorne, the lead figure, spoke in harmonics that bypassed language entirely. You are charged with temporal disruption on a galactic scale. You transmitted knowledge backward through time, created paradoxes, violated causality protocols, and weaponized architecture across 372 civilizations. How do you answer? Guilty, Caliph said simply. And I'd do it again. Silence rippled through the chamber. You admit your crimes without defense? Another counselor asked. They're not crimes, Caliph replied. They're survival. The Velkrith were enslaving the galaxy. Your council did nothing. So I did. We maintain balance, the third counselor said. Intervention creates instability. Your balance was built on suffering, Caliph countered. 47 species enslaved while you watched. How many more before you decided balance was less important than justice? The temporal protocols exist for reasons you cannot comprehend, the fourth counselor stated. Allowing individuals to rewrite history based on personal knowledge creates infinite recursion. Timelines collapse. Causality fragments. Reality itself becomes unstable. Ishara stepped forward. Yet reality remains stable. We anchored every change to causality itself. The timeline hasn't collapsed, it's evolved. Because you forced it to, the fifth counselor accused. You made your preferred future inevitable through temporal manipulation. That is the definition of temporal tyranny. Is it tyranny, Caliph asked, to refuse to die? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Humanity faced extinction, she continued. Total erasure. Neural harvesting. 7 billion people reduced to processing power in Velkrith war machines. I had the knowledge to prevent it and the means to do so. What would you have had me do? Accept annihilation for the sake of temporal purity? You could have sought our counsel, the lead counselor said. By the time I found your counsel, my species would have been extinct. Again I ask, what would you have had me do? Die honorably, knowing you had not disrupted the cosmic order, the second counselor replied. Caliph laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Then your cosmic order is worthless. Any philosophy that requires species to accept genocide for the sake of temporal aesthetics deserves to be disrupted. You speak of justice, the third counselor said, but you have created an arms race. Species now build fortresses backward through time, preparing for wars that haven't started, escalating conflicts that might never occur. You have made the entire galaxy more dangerous. Yes, Caliph admitted. I have. But I've also made slavery impossible. Any species attempting to harvest another now faces defenses built across decades. Conquest becomes prohibitively expensive. The strong can no longer prey on the weak without consequence. That's worth the danger. You have imposed your moral framework on the entire galaxy, the fourth counselor said. Who gave you that right? No one, Kaylee's replied. I took it, because someone had to. Your council had millennia to create a just galaxy and chose not to. So a human architect did it instead, one building at a time, backward through time. The fifth counselor's form flickered with what might have been anger. Your arrogance is justified, interrupted a new voice. The Nexian emissary materialized in the chamber, an act that should have been impossible given the council's dimensional protections. The council presumes authority it has not earned, the Nexian said. You claim to maintain balance but tolerate atrocity. You condemn Kaylee's Thorn for disrupting causality while ignoring that causality was already disrupted by the Velkrith's temporal scouting. She merely turned their weapon against them. The Nexian Concordat has no standing in these proceedings, the lead counselor stated. We have more standing than you, the Nexian replied. We exist across time. We see all possibilities. And we have concluded that Kaylee's Thorn's timeline is superior to the one you would preserve. Her actions have created a galaxy where the weak have tools to resist the strong. That is evolution, not crime. Threxus of the Jeune Collective appeared next, somehow bypassing the Council's security. The Collective agrees. Humanity's backward building saved our species from future conquest. The knowledge shared has freed 47 enslaved civilizations. These are not crimes. More species began appearing, representatives from the liberated worlds, allies Kaylee's had made, civilizations that had used her broadcast to save themselves. The council chamber filled with beings testifying to humanity's contribution. The counselors deliberated in silence that lasted subjective eternities. Finally, the lead counselor spoke. We cannot undo what you have done. The timeline is anchored. The future you built is now inevitable. But we offer a choice, Kaylee's Thorn. What choice? Join us. Become the sixth counselor. Use your knowledge of temporal architecture to help guide other species. Prevent the arms race you've started from spiraling into catastrophe. Kaylee's was quiet for a long moment. She looked at her team, Ishera, who'd become a temporal fixed point to help her. Marcos, who'd trusted her impossible plans. Senna, who'd made fantasy into reality. She looked at the species she'd saved, the galaxy she'd changed. No, she said finally. Shock rippled through the chamber. No, the lead counselor repeated. I'm an architect, Kaylee's explained. Not a politician, not a judge, not a cosmic bureaucrat. I build things. And there's so much left to build. Earth needs defenses against whatever comes next. Humanity needs to expand into the galaxy, carrying our fortress-building philosophy to new worlds. Other species need training in temporal architecture. She smiled. Besides, if I join your council, who's going to keep you honest? Someone needs to be the species that refuses to accept your authority, that builds defenses against even ancient powers, that asks the uncomfortable questions. You would refuse this honor? The second counselor asked, genuinely confused. I would refuse to stop being what I am. You offer me a position of power. I prefer to remain a builder of impossible things. Ishera was grinning. Marcos looked relieved. Senna was already making notes for new projects. The counselors conferred again. Finally, very well. We will not compel you. But understand, the galaxy you have created will face challenges you cannot anticipate. Your temporal disruption has attracted attention from beyond this galaxy, from civilizations who exist in deeper time. Good, Kaylee said. Let them come. I've beaten slavers by building backward. I can handle whatever else the universe throws at me. Your confidence may be misplaced. My confidence has rebuilt an entire timeline. I'll trust it a little longer. The council dismissed them without ceremony. As Kaylee's and her team left the impossible station, Commander Hunt was waiting with their ship. So, he asked, what's the verdict? Not guilty, Kaylee said. Or guilty but pardoned. Or guilty but too stubborn to punish. Honestly, I'm not sure. But they're letting us go. What now? Kaylee's looked out at the galaxy, at billions of stars, trillions of beings, infinite possibilities. She thought about the future she'd built backward, about the species she'd saved, about the fortress civilization humanity had become. Now, she said. Now we build forward. We've secured the past, defended the present. Time to create a future worth all this effort. Time to show the galaxy what humanity can achieve when we're not just surviving but thriving. She pulled up holographic blueprints, designs for generation ships that doubled as mobile fortresses, plans for Dyson spheres with embedded defensive systems, concepts for megastructures that would make humanity's current achievements look like children's toys. "I'm going to need bigger buildings," she said. Marcos groaned. "How much bigger?" Kaylee's smile was fierce. "Galactic scale. If we're going to be the species that builds backward through time, we might as well be the species that builds forward to the stars." As their ship departed, leaving the Galactic Council behind, Kaylee's Thorne, architect, temporal disruptor, savior of humanity, began designing monuments to human survival that would endure for millions of years. She'd beaten extinction by building backward. Now she'd achieve immortality by building forward. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how she wanted it.